I gave birth to twins. I'm counting on a $12,000 congratulatory gift. Katie said this with a triumphant voice. I answered her loudly. Okay. I'll go with my husband, the real estate king worth $500 million. What? Katie's bewildered voice could be heard over the phone. Probably, her parents had told her my partner was some shabby common man. Wah, $500 million means what? Exactly what it sounds like. Katie seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but chuckle. Then Katie retorted in surprise. That can't be, because... Well, let's talk about that face to face. Including what you did back then. Wait a sec, sis. Then, I'll come over tomorrow. I unilaterally said so and hung up the phone. Katie called several times, but I ignored all of them. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Imagining Katie's regretful face, I laughed loudly. My name is Wendy Brown. I'm a 38-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, David. A housekeeper does the household chores, so I live a luxurious life every day. However, David is actually my second husband. I divorced my first husband 6 years ago. I met David later at a restaurant where I was working, and we remarried. My first husband, John, was someone my parents arranged for me to marry. My father liked John, the president of a company that did business with my parents' company. I had no say in the matter, and the marriage was decided the day after the matchmaking. Matchmaking was rare at the time. But as the eldest daughter expected to inherit the family business, it didn't seem so strange. Thus, our marriage was far from sweet. John, a president with an annual sales of $50 million, seldom came home and was often out playing. Even when he did come home, he would just make a disgusted face and go to his room. Fed up with such a life, I was suddenly called back to my parents' house. You should get a divorce. Huh? What's wrong all of a sudden? I was confused by my mother's sudden words. John's company was thriving. There was no benefit to divorcing now. Maybe my parents felt sorry for me? Holding that hope, I was shocked at what I saw next. Why are John and Katie? Katie is my sister. 10 years younger than me, my parents doted on her. As if they hardly cared about me. Katie entered the room arm in arm with John. Sis. I've taken a liking to John. So, I'll take him, okay? Take him? John isn't a toy. But, John likes me more, see? Right? Katie leaned on John as she said this. Then, John looked at me with a smirk. I felt a bad premonition the moment I saw his eyes. Younger girls are better than older ones, and Katie is prettier. I think Katie makes a better president's wife. That's... Mom. I, who was about to be discarded for being older, sought help from my mother. I was raised strictly as the eldest daughter, but I believed my mother loved me. That's why I told you to get a divorce quickly. Katie wants him, so give him to her. You're the older sister, right? That's... I was dumbfounded. I knew my mother was lenient with Katie, but I thought she would be on my side at a time like this. Then my father spoke quietly. Just get the divorce over with quickly. From today on, Katie will be the successor of this house. Someone with a stain on their family register is a disgrace. Once you're divorced, get out of here immediately. Even you, Dad. With tears blurring my vision, I wrote the divorce papers. Then, after being told by my parents to pack only my personal belongings, I was quickly kicked out of the house. You're going to have a hard time from now on, sis. Consider this as severance pay. Katie is so kind. Be thankful. The two of them threw a bundle of money at me in mockery. Holding that bundle, I was at a loss for what to do next. What am I going to do now? Being a full-time housewife, I had no way to earn a living. After all, I had been trained as a bride but had never even had a part-time job. For starters, I decided to go to a hotel to think about what to do next. First, I decided to secure a place to live. I moved to the next town and went to a real estate agent. Thanks to my savings, I was able to rent a one-room apartment for living alone without any difficulty. I absolutely didn't want to use the compensation thrown at me by those two. With a determination to get revenge someday, I was motivated to start anew. After settling into the one-room apartment, the next step was to find a job. However, it was difficult to secure employment. Then, I received a call from Katie on my smartphone. "Sis, did you not know that John has influence over this entire area? You won't get hired anywhere you apply." That's terrible. I was at a loss for what to do. As Katie said, I couldn't find a job. Without the ability to work, my savings would eventually run out. I decided to move to a town far away. The town I moved to was peaceful, with the scent of the sea breeze. I was hired by a small restaurant there and was able to work and live in. "Hey, give me some beer." "Right away." "I want some snacks over here." Understood. Though I was not used to it, the customers were all kind to me as I served the food. Gradually, I began to do more and eventually became known as the face of the restaurant. Wendy's smile gives me the strength to face tomorrow. "Wendy, aren't you going to get married?" I'm not thinking about a marriage anymore." "That's a waste, isn't it?" I often received suggestions to remarry because I was still young, but I always dodged the question. I definitely didn't want to end up with someone like John again. "Wendy, could I have a beer?" "David. Thanks for coming in, I'll get it for you." While everyone was suggesting remarriage, David, a regular customer, never made such teasing remarks. I found our conversations very comforting and began to look forward to his visits. David asked me out on a date about 3 years after I arrived in this town. "Would you like to go see the ocean?" "What?" Well, it's right in front of us." Seeing David flustered, who is usually calm, made me chuckle. I didn't mind his invitation. I decided to accept it. Our first date was nothing more than a walk on the sandy beach in front of the restaurant. But we talked about various things. David shared that he had lost his parents early and was living alone in this town he loved. I shared about my family and John. David cried on my behalf. I thought, maybe I should have cried like this. Watching the tears flow from David's eyes, I realized how much he empathized with me. We started going out more frequently and eventually began dating. I can't remember who said, "I love you" first, but our relationship naturally progressed. About a year later, David proposed to me. I'd like to share a grave with you." "Is that a proposal?" "That's the idea." Despite David's lack of confidence, I smiled warmly and accepted his proposal. We got married. Although I had no intention of informing my parents or sister, David suggested we at least inform my parents. After 4 years, I contacted them and returned home. "Oh, you're alive. Remarriage?" "Go ahead, but we won't be providing any assistance. If you're remarrying such a poor man, don't ever cross our threshold again." Anger colored my face red in front of David. Indeed, David doesn't care for luxury. Yet he wore a high-brand suit today. I didn't want any further relationship with parents who could say such things. I was about to speak out in anger when David intervened. "Then, we'll be taking your daughter with us. We won't contact you in the future, nor will we ask for any assistance." David. My parents were surprised by David's straightforward attitude. But they quickly became angry at the perceived slight. David handled their anger with a smile, took my hand, and we left my family home. I didn't expect it to be that bad. I'm sorry for making you go through this. No, don't worry about it. It's actually a bit of a relief. I smiled at David, who seemed relieved by my reaction. We then returned to our new home. After a while, we started receiving an increased number of calls from unknown numbers. I ignored all of them and consulted David. Let's ignore them. But it's creepy, so let's change our number tomorrow. Yes, thank you. David promptly arranged for us to change our phone number the next morning. After that, the anonymous calls stopped. I was relieved, but soon after, we started receiving calls from unknown numbers again. Hello. The caller would hang up without saying anything. Feeling uneasy, I consulted David again. He advised me to ignore all calls from unknown numbers, so I did. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I gradually forgot about the whole ordeal. One day, I received a call from my estranged family home. I had forgotten to delete their number from my phone book, so I reluctantly answered the call. To my surprise, it wasn't my mother on the line but Katie. Hello, sis. How are you? Katie. Don't sound so scary. It's natural that my voice betrayed my feelings since she's the last person I ever wanted to talk to. The first thing I did was to confirm the question that popped into my mind. How did you get my number? It was easy to find. After all, I have money. Her tone confirmed to me that Katie hadn't changed at all. I was about to hang up when Katie cheerfully started talking. I gave birth to twins. I'm expecting a gift of $12,000. Katie said this with a triumphant voice. I loudly responded to her. Okay. I'll come with my husband, the real estate tycoon worth $500 million. What? I could hear Katie's incredulous voice over the phone. Presumably, my parents had told her that my husband was some unremarkable common man. Wah, $500 million, what do you mean? Exactly what I said. Katie seemed confused by my words. I couldn't help but chuckle. Then, Katie suddenly retorted. That's impossible, because... Well, we'll discuss everything in person, including your actions at that time. Wait, just a minute, sis. Then, I'll see you tomorrow. I unilaterally ended the call. Katie tried calling several times after that, but I ignored all her calls. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I waited for David to come home and explained the situation to him. David smiled and made a suggestion. I'll go in my usual attire. I nodded in agreement. I also decided to wear my regular clothes and return to my parents' house. I'm home. Oh, you're back. Did you bring your husband? What? Katie came running to the entrance with a smile, but she was shocked by our attire. No wonder, since our clothes were bought from a no-brand store for common folk, with each piece costing around $20. What's with those shabby clothes? Aren't you a real estate king? I responded with a smile to Katie's words. Then, Katie misinterpreted and gave me a mocking look. So it was a lie after all. You can't hide it even if you try to show off. Oh, it's not a lie. I said this and pointed to my smartphone screen. It displayed David's name and photo. Katie stared at it intently before exclaiming, Brown, as in that major real estate group. The president. No way. It's not a lie. Katie glared at me resentfully and then pointed at our clothes, berating us. Then why are you wearing such shabby clothes? I responded with a mocking expression. Well, we have to match the management situation of the house, don't we? Huh? Are you saying our house is in decline? No, I judged this level of etiquette to be appropriate. David and I usually wear proper visiting clothes or formal attire when visiting someone's home. We have never insulted anyone by wearing t-shirts and jeans. That's why we deliberately chose this attire for this occasion. There were 2 reasons for this choice. First, to mislead Katie and dampen her spirits, which was a success judging by her frustrated expression. And second, I started walking towards the living room, followed by David, with Katie trailing behind us. Having someone as reassuring as David by my side, I doubt there's anyone else like him. I energetically opened the living room door. You're being noisy. Be more graceful like Katie when you open the door. What's with that cheap look? Really, I'm disappointed in you. As soon as the door opened, my parents started criticizing. I couldn't help but laugh. Katie was saying something about marrying a rich man. But it seems it was just Wendy's pretense. Right. That's all you can afford to wear, after all. I wish you wouldn't cross our threshold in such tacky clothes. As my parents freely expressed their disdain, I smiled and retorted. Maybe it's judging people by their clothes that's causing your business to fail? What? My parents were taken aback by my comment, while Katie looked bewildered. I decided to explain politely. I heard you were in the red last year? And this term is looking shaky too, isn't it? That's none of your business. I'd like to say it doesn't concern me, but unfortunately, we're still related by the family register. My father glared at me resentfully. His expression reminded me so much of Katie. It dawned on me that while I took after our mother, Katie resembled our father. In truth, my father's company has been on a decline since John married Katie. After receiving Katie's call, I had David check, and far from recovering. Their performance was worsening. The second reason we wore low-cost clothing was this. We wanted to let our nearly bankrupt parents underestimate us. So when they found out about their impending bankruptcy, the shock would be greater. As my parents glared at me, I sighed and continued. I plan to renounce any inheritance when the time comes. You were planning to inherit. Money grubber. All of Mom and Dad's money is mine. Katie, who had been silent, interrupted my speech and snapped. It seemed she didn't understand what I had said. Although it would be easy to explain, honestly, it felt too bothersome. However, the conversation couldn't progress without clarification. Just then, David succinctly explained on my behalf. Your parents' company is on the verge of bankruptcy. What? Katie looked at our parents in shock, who awkwardly looked away. Then, Katie did something unexpected. She clung to David's arm. So David, could you cover for them? In return, you can do whatever you want with me, just kidding. Despite Katie's lighthearted words, tension filled the air between David and me. David sighed deeply, forcibly removed Katie's arm, and spoke up. Could you not do that? It's repulsive. Repulsive. Me? Yes. It's repulsive. David reiterated firmly. Katie, seemingly shocked, staggered away from David and glared at him with teary eyes. How dare you say such rude things to me? I'm prettier than that plain sister of mine. Huh? That's impossible. Wendy is slimmer, her skin is clearer, and her features are more refined. Above all, her heart is much purer. David began listing my good qualities, my cooking skills, intellect, compassion, and honesty. It made me sound like a perfect person, which was somewhat embarrassing. I tried to stop David by lightly tugging on his sleeve twice. Then, David turned to me with a warm smile. This modesty is another charm you have that's different from hers. Excuse me. Katie stamped her feet in frustration. Katie had gained significantly more weight since the last time I saw her. She must have put on at least 45 pounds. Her once praised beautiful face was now marred with acne and blemishes. Far from the beauty she was known as. It seemed like a combination of parental spoiling and a decrease in metabolism due to age had caused her to gain weight, typical of the self-indulgent Katie. However, our parents started defending her. Katie just got a bit rounder from giving birth. She'll get back to her shape in no time. No, this looks more like the result of an unhealthy lifestyle. You stay out of it. My mother yelled at me, her face turning red. The mother I once thought was absolute now seemed far from intimidating. By the way, there's a possibility that the sons born are not John's. Hey. Is that true? As I spoke, John's voice came from behind. Turning around, I saw John holding 2 babies. Ah. John. Long time no see. Never mind that. What do you mean? John confronted me with a fierce look, but David intervened and started explaining on my behalf. I heard about John from Wendy, and we had some acquaintances look into it before coming here. I didn't expect to catch the tale so quickly. David took out his smartphone, showing a photo of a man and woman entering a hotel hand in hand. Upon seeing it, John exclaimed, You were still seeing that guy. And so, John, without being asked, suddenly started talking about another man. Right after we got married, she cheated on me with that guy in the photo. She said it was just once, so I forgave her. John said this, glaring at Katie. Then, Katie glared back at John and retorted, Forgave me? After you became a subsidiary of our company, you have some nerve. What? You insisted it was for the best, didn't you? Katie and John were blaming each other, engaging in an ugly argument. It seems that right after they got married, John's company came under my father's company's umbrella. Soon after, their business went downhill. If I knew it would be like this, I would have never divorced Wendy. Excuse me. What are you saying? You think my sister is better than me? Impossible. John raised his voice at Katie, who was hysterically screaming. Of course. Wendy never blamed me for cheating, and I was free to do as I liked. If there were kids with Wendy, she would take care of them, so I didn't need to. After saying that, John suddenly seemed to realize something. I felt a bad premonition from his expression. That's right. Wendy. Let's remarry. Ah. It must have been destiny for us to end up this way. John, delighting in his realization, kneeled in front of me. I stepped back in disgust. Then, David stepped between John and me. Wendy is my wife. There's no chance of her remarrying you. Huh? Move aside, man. John yelled at David irritably. I answered John from behind David. I could never remarry you. I would never want your children. Oh, right, you couldn't have children anyway. But still, impossible. What? What do you mean I can't have children? John looked at us dumbfounded. My parents and Katie had the same expression. I decided to explain to them. Remember when I went to the gynecologist while we were still married? I had tests done. Don't you remember? Ah. I remember being dragged to the gynecologist. But it was your fault, wasn't it? John seemed to desperately want to believe it was my fault, repeatedly insisting his health was fine. I confronted John with the truth after 6 years. The one who can't have children is you, John. Lies, lies. Then whose kids are these? They're mine, right? Unfortunately, they're not your children. John slumped down upon hearing this. A maid hurriedly took the babies from John's hands. Katie was gaping in the background. So, Katie. It seems they're not John's kids. Sis, why didn't you tell me he was defective? If you had told me properly, by now. Katie began to shift the blame masterfully. I listened silently until she calmed down, then smiled and said, "You've made your bed, now lie in it." "What?" "Then give me David." David himself already said no. "Then give me money." "Family should help each other out. You're one to talk." I was irritated by Katie's words. There was no such thing as mutual assistance in our family. In times of hardship and distress, instead of support, I only received cold treatment. Unfortunately, I'm not part of your family. You are. Come on, sis. Don't be sulky. Katie's words were irritating, but responding with tit for tat would get us nowhere. I took a deep breath. Just as I was about to retort, my mother spoke first. "Wendy, I'm sorry for everything. But we're really in trouble. If you really have money, won't you help us?" "That's right. As Katie said, family should help each other. Let's put everything behind us, shall we?" I was utterly astonished by what they were saying. After all, forgiveness is something for the wrong to offer, not for the wrongdoers to request. It was useless to expect them to reflect. I decided to discard the little affection for my family that I had left and gave them a cold look. Noticing my gaze, the three of them flinched but soon forced a creepy smile. "I apologize for everything, okay?" That's right. We're making amends here, so you should compromise a little." Their attitude showed no remorse, prompting me to sigh. Then, with a smile only on my lips, I questioned my mother. "Hey, why do I have to go to such lengths for a half-sister and biological parents who oppressed me?" "Half-sister? What are you talking about? Katie is my child." Even after saying so much, my father seemed clueless, which was frustrating. But it seemed like my mother understood what I meant. Her face turned pale. "What on earth are you talking about, child? It's okay, if you want to pretend. But I saw you cheating with another man when I was younger." Yes, I had seen my mother bringing a man into our house back when I was living there. It was not long after they got married. Both Father and John were away on business trips, and Katie was on a trip with friends. It was just my mother and me at home. When I came back from running errands my mother had asked me to do, I found a pair of men's shoes I didn't recognize. At first, I thought we had a visitor and went to the living room, but no one was there. Then, to my surprise, I heard voices coming from the bedroom. I wanted to cover my ears. But then, I heard something that made my eyes widen. He doesn't know that Katie isn't his child. Katie isn't Dad's child. I had to cover my mouth with both hands to stop myself from screaming. I wanted to hear more, but sensing they were about to come out of the bedroom, I quickly left the house to kill time until the man left and then returned home. Curious about that incident, I did some digging right after I got married to David. It turned out the man was Mr. Wagner, an old friend of my father's, and the affair was ongoing. "So, you threw me out because Katie, who is the child of your affair, wanted John." "What do you mean?" My mother, turning pale, shook her head in denial. Even my father, finally catching on, turned red with anger and glared at her. I decided to give my father the name of the man my mother had an affair with as a parting gift. Mom's affair partner is Mr. Wagner. Wagner. She had an affair with him. Even now. Father stood there, stunned. Mr. Wagner, being one of my father's closest friends, meant the betrayal hit him harder than most. However, I felt no sympathy for him in that situation. I'm not Dad's child. Katie was also stunned, leaving no one to lash out at me. Are we done here? I've decided to renounce any inheritance. So do as you please from here on out. But in return, don't ask for my help. I want nothing to do with you from now on. Though my voice quivered a bit towards the end, I managed to say everything I wanted to. All right, time to go. I gave David a look, feeling refreshed. Just before leaving the room, I turned around and took an envelope out of my bag. Oh right, this is the compensation you threw at me. I haven't used it, so it's still the same amount. Consider this a return gift for the birth celebration. It's a bit more than you asked for, but think of it as severance money. I said this and placed the envelope in front of Katie. Katie was so shocked she didn't move. We left the four of them behind and exited my family home. Afterwards, my parents didn't divorce, but their relationship turned icy. My mother's movements were severely restricted, and her affair with Mr. Wagner was forcibly ended. My father stepped down from his CEO position and tried to live on his pension. But due to his long-standing spending habits, it didn't work out, and he ended up selling the house. When I passed by my former home recently, it was now an empty lot, which somewhat lifted my spirits. Apparently, they now live in a rented apartment, and both my parents have had to start working to afford the rent. My mother has never worked before, so she has been hopping from job to job. Katie and John ended up divorcing. Naturally, Katie took custody of the children. However, having never worked, Katie struggled to support 2 children and ended up imposing herself on her affair partner, who was already married and in the midst of his own domestic crisis. Feeling half related, I could sympathize, but remembering all she had done, a part of me thought she got what she deserved. John attempted to revive his company post-divorce, but was thwarted by his tarnished reputation, leading to a cessation of business deals, stock crashes, and eventual bankruptcy. Moreover, after being swindled in a marriage scam through a dating app, and losing the compensation Katie paid, along with accruing debts from dubious sources, he now works in construction daily to repay his debts. David received a call from him begging for money but firmly refused, citing their lack of relation. Given his persistent demands for a divorce from me, there was no room for sympathy. As for me, I'm currently expecting our first child. David was overjoyed upon hearing the news and has already started designing a child-first home, even though it's a bit premature. He's also begun selecting a babysitter, which made me laugh at his eagerness. We're having a boy. Both of us being estranged from our families, the kindness of our townspeople, who have already offered their help, ensures our son will be born into a loving community. How are you feeling today, Wendy? I'm feeling quite well today. That's great. Hope you have a healthy baby. Yes, thank you. I receive such warm wishes during my walks. It makes me genuinely happy, and I'm grateful to have moved here. Wendy. I couldn't decide between blue or green for the bedding, so I bought both. You're getting ahead of yourself. Despite admonishing David for his daily purchases, I'm knitting baby socks, planning to finish a week before the due date. Oh, he kicked. Really? Daddy's here. Reacting to my words, David talks to my belly, and right then, the baby kicks again. He responded. Daddy loves you too. Oh, David. I can't help but find him adorable, even if I'm a bit amused. Immersed in this happiness, I continue knitting.